Now, because if African Americans weren't slaves for 400 years, if they weren't slaves literally only like 200 years ago, they'd be in a better position. People's great grandfathers were living in the Jim Crow times. Not grandpas, I'm sorry. We're living in Jim Crow times. Think about that. Like, what if your grandpa was in Jim Crow, Alabama? You kidding me? You won't necessarily be where you are today, probably, because your grandpa was in a position where he was able to raise your parents to get to the position to be able to raise you to be the person you are today, right? But if you're living in an era where black people are literally targeted, the whole idea of black people being targeted today, we can discuss that. But in 1955, I hope that's not a discussion for anybody about black people being targeted. When black people were literally being targeted, imagine your grandpa growing up in that time and him having a kid, barely having shit to give to that kid. And that kid barely has anything when he has you. You know what I mean? And this is just a cycle that's continuing.
Hello and welcome to the Paul Garcia Show, a show about the remarkable people of Central Illinois. I'm your host, Paul Garcia, and I invite you to join me as I speak with these individuals about their stories, the lessons they've learned, and the knowledge they've gained along the way. Tune in every Sunday to witness the power of bringing each new individual's unique journey into the spotlight. Zay Okwata, thank you so much for coming on to the show, man. It's been a long time coming.
Hey, absolutely, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. My
Looking forward to this, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
So, Zay, you do a lot of things. You were an intern broadcaster at Fox News 32 in Chicago, and you also run and are the founder of Influential.tv, which has over 3,000 followers on Instagram, focuses its content primarily on black excellence, hip-hop, and business. And you are also very knowledgeable on issues that plague or face the black community. And you're very blunt and strong with your opinions about those things.
Yes, I am.
So I can't wait to talk about all that today. And I just guess we'll start off with this. What do you believe is the current state of race relations in America, specifically pertaining to the black community?
I mean, the current state of race relations in America, first and foremost, is in two different ways. It depends on really who you're talking to, especially nowadays because of how divisive our country has become. So let's look at how the left and liberals will look at the current state of race in America. They'd say that everything is unequal. If you're black, you're almost handicapped. If you're black, you're born disadvantaged, which these are true things, but the current state for them is, what are they doing about it? They're just talking about it more, essentially. And then if you look at the right, they would say, we've come a long way. There is no racism in America. That is all manipulation coming from the left. But that's also not the current state of racism in America. If you look at the current state of racism in America, it's essentially what it was 50, 60 years ago. So both people are completely wrong. Nothing has changed. And then nothing has changed, and we're also not trying to make any changes. So the current state of racism in America is we are at this place now where essentially it's become a tool that people can use. Racism itself has become a tool that different powerful people can use to manipulate what black people, white people, Mexican people, for the few of those people at the top to gain power off of it. So it's essentially, it hasn't gone anywhere. Racism is exactly what it's been, and it looks like something completely different from what it was in the 1950s, but that's because they've changed its face. They've changed its face so that we don't recognize the racism.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What do you mean by they changed the face? Because since the 60s and the 50s in segregation, laws have in fact changed that allow and promote for kids of all ethnicities and races to go to the same school.
Inclusion.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Inclusion is the main change. But that's a legislative change. I mean, how can you say that things haven't changed? And what do you mean by they've changed?
So
in the
if you want to
face
look
of
at it socially things have changed. Absolutely. And when you talk about social racism, 60 years ago, I don't think you would have invited me on your show. That's an example of something that's changed right there. We can communicate with each other. We understand each other. We don't necessarily hate each other. We have no beef, right? I'm talking generally between white America and black America. We generally don't have beef. Economically is what's key. Economics is power. Economically, not much has changed. So if you really look into the statistics of it, do you know that in America, a black family has less wealth than we did in the 1950s and 1960s?
I have heard that.
So that raises the question, how? Why? That doesn't make any sense, because you just said that we're being included more. There are programs out there and there are laws that have been passed to help black people be assimilate better into America. But how are we getting poorer? That doesn't make any sense. So if you look at capitalism, who is the person who is ultimately making the most gain over time? Is it the owner of the company or is it the employees?
Oh, owner of the company.
The owner of the company. Okay. So in the 1950s and prior to that, when America was segregated, when everything was either white only or black only or colored only, you had to forcefully spend your money and your finances with people who looked like you. So let's say me and you own a shoe store, right? We own two different shoe stores. You own Garcia's shoe store across the street, and I own Zay's shoe store across the street, right? And then mine is colored only and yours is white only. If you're selling shoes to just white people and you don't allow any black people come to buy shoes from you, you are then empowering white people in your community. That's not good for social purposes, because that causes issues like you don't have black and white people talking to each other. They don't understand each other, and they can hatred, essentially. Polarization. It comes from that. But what that did for the black community is that forcefully made black people spend their money with each other because they had no other option. So if I get $50 right now and I go put that into the black community, and my next $50, I go put that into the black community, and the next time I get $50, I go put that into the black community again. And if all black people are doing that, what does that do? That builds the black economy. And when the black economy is built, the owners of those companies can then hire more black people. And when you hire more black people, what does that happen? What does that mean when you have more employees and the company is flourishing? The company is a lot more efficient because you have more employees, right? You're well staffed. So essentially, this built a powerful, strong black economy. Now, I think it was 1968 when they took away Jim Crow laws and you can no longer segregate, and it was illegal to not sell to somebody based off the color of their skin. This then gave black companies competition. Can you understand that?
Yeah.
So because the white companies, they already had years and years of an advantage because they've been around longer than black companies. You know what I mean? They've been around longer than the black companies. So as soon as integration was placed strategically, white companies came into black communities and spaces to beat out these black companies of their own business. Okay. And then essentially that crumbles the black economy. So black people, as we're looking today, we don't own any industry of power. Look at our school industry. We're not in control of any of that because we're not in control of the property that these schools are in. Apart from just the school industry, look at the health industry. We're not in control of any of the hospitals because we're not the ones who are investing into these hospitals, because the businesses that we built to try to gain the capital to invest into these different institutions of power were essentially, they were taken out because white business owners that benefited off of the law of integration, which on paper, like you just said, it looks like a good thing because socially it allows black people and white people come together and work together. But if it's only white people who own all the companies and own all of the industries, and after integration, they place their industries and place their companies in the black communities to put out the black businesses that were already there, that's kind of another tactic to have power over these people. So essentially now they have the power to employ certain black people. And if you don't fit, and if you don't think a certain way, I believe me and you we talked about this over social media. And if you don't think a certain way, if you don't think and fit the image of what is really liberals, because liberals were the ones who passed the integration laws. And I'm not saying that was a bad thing. It was just in the way they did it. It was a strategic thing. And they passed these integration laws to really just have power over the black community.
Do you think that was literally their intention?
Yes, it
in
was.
Making it?
It was their intention. Because if you look at it now, just if you're watching something like MSNBC, CNN, it is the same rhetoric. It is the same rhetoric over and over. You can tell that somebody who truly cares about black people, you are going to talk about the number one things, the most important things that are affecting us. For example, something that I constantly talk about that I cannot stress enough is the gang violence in inner cities, major cities all over America.
Sure.
The fourth highest way that a young African American man like myself dies is through homicide by another African American man, not by police. Now, when I say this, you're gonna have people, oh my God, he hates black people. He's racist to his own people. And then black people will think that black people will call me a coon. White people will call me a coon. But essentially, I'm saying this because if you're looking at what is killing us the most, it is not police. It's a big deal. I'm not sitting here and saying that we shouldn't be concerned about police brutality. We definitely need to adjust the police system in some ways. But what is hurting us in a main way is this gang violence. And then gang violence is also stems from the same thing that causes police brutality. And that's racism in America.
Can you explain that? Explain how gang violence is a product of racism.
Why do people have to join gangs in the first place?
If I were to guess, it'd be scarcity of money at home, a lack of another option, and lack of another form of income, things like that. Yeah. And also, I think it's kind of, in the inner cities, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's kind of glamorized a little bit. It's almost heroic to be, a successful gang member.
I like that you touched on that. But who kind of creates that culture to glamorize it?
Rap artists, in part, I would say. Movies. Movies that you would see on Black Entertainment
BET
television. Yeah. But music and the hip-hop industry and movies. That's my guess.
Okay. But we just like we had talked before. We talked about this before. I asked you, when it comes to a company, who has more power? Who gets the most benefit? Is it the owner or is it the worker? And you said the owner, right? In the hip hop industry, do you think the rappers are the ones who own the product, or they work in the industry? They own the industry, or they work in the industry?
I guess they do. They work in the industry, but I don't know if they're necessarily an employee, because ultimately they decide what they say, or at least they have the last say in determining the lyrics of their music. And some more than others. Some will just rap about what's the most popular thing to rap about, what's going to get them the most hits. Maybe that's hating cops, for instance.
But yes, they do have, in a lot of cases they do, in some cases they do have the ultimate say. But let's touch on the fact that these record labels won't hire you. They're not going to sign you if you don't want to rap about A, B, and C. And who are the ones that are controlling that? Who are the ones that are controlling it to be that way, that they won't sign you if you don't rap about A, B, and C? Those aren't black men and women that look like me sitting at the top signing these checks for the futures and the babies to go out there and make black men look like idiots. Mm-hmm. No. Those are powerful, rich, white men, probably liberals. And this is why I hate this is why I hate this idea that some white liberal is going to come save the day for African Americans. Mm-hmm. Is at the top of those food chains, at the top of those hip hop industries that are specifically selecting the black men that put irresponsibility on a pedestal to glamorize that behavior, like you said. And then it's a cycle. And then they go into the homes. A lot of cases, they arrest a lot of people for some reason that they shouldn't be arrested for. There are millions of black men sitting in jail for something as little as a gram of marijuana. Mm-hmm. Millions. So think about all of these young black boys that grew up fatherless and young black women, girls that grew up fatherless.
Right.
You don't have a male role model. Mm-hmm. You don't really see a lot of successful black people on TV. The only successful black people you see on TV are athletes and and musicians. Mm-hmm. Hip hop rappers for the most part.
Yeah.
And what are these rappers doing? What are these rappers talking about? Are they talking about building equity for you and your family?
No.
Are they talking about being a good father for you and your children?
No.
They're talking about sex, murder, irresponsibility, drugs, with a black man's face on it, with black people in the music videos, promoting it. First of all, promoting it to the world so other people can see. Just imagine being a 13-year-old white kid. Being a 13-year-old white kid, you've never really interacted with black people in your life through no fault of your own. And this is the only images you get to see of black people. Let's be fair. Mm-hmm. What in the hell will you think of black people? Mm-hmm. And these are liberal companies that are putting out these images.
It's very interesting, your whole point with that.
So when you ask me the question, do you think they glamorize it in the city? It's like, yes, it is glamorized in the city. But it's not glamorized by the same black people. It's glamorized by powerful, rich, white men at the top who are probably liberals. Mm-hmm.
We are brought to you by Tricia's Treasures in Fairbury, Illinois. From gorgeous jewelry and fabulous furniture to one-of-a-kind collectibles and repurposed goods, Tricia's Treasures is truly a treasure chest of unique gems. This charming Fairbury store is host to a vast selection of antiques and vintage goods, furnishings, rare and historic memorabilia, and more that is sure to catch your eye and warm your heart. Tricia's Treasures also specializes in refurbishing and repurposing furniture, containers, machinery, or anything that your creative mind can think to do something with in order to do our little part in reducing our environmental footprint. This place is an Etsy and Pinterest paradise that you simply have to come visit. They have thousands of pictures of their inventory on their Facebook page, and they even offer local delivery as well. So for one-of-a-kind antiques, art, collectibles, furniture, gifts, or for any of your refurbishing and repurposing needs, check out Tricia's Treasures in Fairbury, Illinois, located in the old bowling alley on the west end of town, right off of Route 24. That's Tricia's Treasures, a treasured vintage store. Very interesting. Okay, so you raised a great point about the heads of these record-making businesses. The people, so a rapper will go to a corporation of some sort with their music, and the corporation will decide if they will put it on a record and sell that. And the people that run that corporation that does that are typically liberal white men, like you were saying, which is interesting. So do you truly believe then that they have... It sounds like you're painting it like it's some elaborate scheme. Like they're like, okay, the rich white guy at the top is literally trying to keep these black artists rapping about the same thing so that they won't one day come into positions that are competitive with his own or something.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's truly the case?
But that's what capitalism...
Because that's almost evil. That's almost
yes! But that's what And then the thing is, when you try to explain this to white people, is they get very, very like guilty and like, I don't put... This is not... This doesn't mean white people innately do this.
Sure.
This just means that there's certain people who understand the system is skewed into a certain way to make it a little easier for white people. And if you want to, and if you look at capitalism, if you want to make a lot of money in capitalism, you need to understand that you always need a working class. You always need a working class. So who's already in the working class in America?
Oh, would it be Black America?
Black Americans, Latino Americans, and they're the ones who are working for these companies that these successful businessmen own. I'm not saying this is just a big group with all of these businessmen together just plotting against black people. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying that they understand to keep the capitalistic structure that some people need to be at the bottom. And right now, black people are that working class that are at the bottom, that are feeding into capitalism for these companies to grow. They're the ones who are working the bottom line job for these companies to grow. They're the ones who are shopping at the Walmarts, the Walgreens for these companies to grow. You know what I mean? And without black people, they will not have the capital, they will not have the resources to be able to build their companies and build their industries because black people are the bottom class. So when you start, you asked me, you believe that I seem like it is some type of scheme, and I do. I think it is a scheme. There are definitely schemes that are definitely ran in society to keep things in place so people can continue to have their power. And it is evil. It is evil. But I saw a cross. I believe you're a Christian. Many places in the Bible, doesn't it say that the love of money is evil? And these are people who love money and understand that if you manipulate society in a certain way, they get more money.
Sure.
So it's not because they are, ooh, black people, I just hate you. It's because they see this. They see a capitalistic structure. They understand some people need to be at the bottom for that capitalistic structure to grow. And for that capitalistic structure to maintain. And essentially, if that structure maintains, they can continue to hold power within their company. You know what I mean?
So like you said, we could go a bunch of different places with this, but just on what you just said, and you do think it is a large scheme, you know? I've come to understand that recently, like in these past few years, that conspiracy theories and theories about the super rich being more evil than we would think. I'm not against guys that make an honest living and become millionaires at all.
Me neither. Don't get me wrong. Sure. Me neither.
But I do know that, like you said, a love of money, as it says in the Bible, that if you have a love of money, you're susceptible, you're at risk for being corrupted in some pretty nasty ways. And I think of things like Pedophile Island. Who is that?
Epstein?
Epstein and all that. And all those super rich people that were, tangled up in that whole mess. That just goes to show, like, there's fringe conspiracy theories really aren't that crazy. I'm like, okay, so that really happened. There really was a pedophile island that a bunch of prominent names in America went to.
Somebody had told you about that, wouldn't it have sounded like crazy as hell?
Come on, you're crazy.
You know what I'm saying?
You're a conspiracy.
So it's like when I tell you about this idea that there are people behind the hip hop industry to create images and create the perception of the black man. So black people, so black males and other people can see themselves as inherent threats.
Sure.
They're black. Like, just imagine being like a 6-year-old black kid and you never see any. There are black men all over the world that conduct themselves with pride, that conduct themselves business-like. They protect their women. They protect their family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that's not what the media wants to show you.
No.
They go to the 2%.
Yeah.
Of the people who are acting like idiots, put that on TV for the world to see, to make it look like these are all black people.
Well, okay, you said 2%. This is something I want to touch on. You said that recently, in the past, we'll say decade, the black community, black America has become poorer. But you look at
more than a decade, it's the past 40 years. It's slowly declining.
Well, what's interesting is you look 50 years back. Right now in the black community, there's a 70% single motherhood rate. 70% of black kids don't have a father in the picture in America. 50 years ago, it was 80% had both parents. 80% of both kids had both parents. The number one, and this is, people will get mad about you stating facts, as silly as that is, but the number one predictor of growing up and living a life in poverty is whether or not you had one or two parents.
Yeah.
If you had a single mother, the odds are you're going to grow up in poverty. What do you think? Do you think that has contributed to the black community becoming gradually more poor over the past few decades? And if not just that, what else do you think has contributed to that?
When you look at income and net worth are two different things. So the net worth of the black family has declined in the past 50 years. The income has risen because now you have black women. I think black women are the most educated group of Americans.
Okay.
When it comes to ratio, black women are the most educated Americans. Almost, we don't realize this, but a lot of them go to college. A lot of them go to college. And then, so this is now, they're getting higher paying jobs because of this. So that rose the salary, the yearly income. But when it comes to net worth, we don't own homes. We don't own businesses. So when I won't say it, when they took the father out, that had more so to do with welfare, I would say.
Yeah, because they would get extra money if they weren't married.
Exactly. That had more so to do with welfare. And then there's a lot of other stuff that mixes into it too. That's why I talked about the whole rapping idea. It kind of culturalized this idea for men to not believe that if you hook up with a girl and you get her pregnant and she's not your woman, you don't have to be there for the child. And there's a big group of people who behave like that.
Yeah.
But who brought that culture into black society? That never used to be a thing.
You're really going down an interesting avenue.
That
right
never
here.
used to be a thing in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
But who brought that idea into it?
You're saying
That's
it's the
what I'm
welfare
saying.
system then?
Not even the welfare system is a part. The welfare system is essentially what incentivized mothers to not believe they needed men. Because what is the innately women see men as protection, correct?
Yeah, biologically.
Biologically.
That's basically primitive.
That's primitive. It's primitive. When you're looking, when me and you are looking for girls, and we're looking to date a girl, and we like a girl, we're not thinking about, okay, I want to date this girl because she has so much ambition, and one day she's gonna get a really good job, and we're gonna make a lot of money, and she's gonna be able to take care of me and the kids. No, that's not what we think.
Sure.
But girls do think like that. You know, that's one of the things that are on the little checklist.
On average.
Okay, like this guy shows ambition. He has a good work ethic. Like he's not a lazy bum. Like I can see him being something. I can see him protecting a family in 10, 15 years.
Right.
You know?
Being a provider.
Yep. So I can see myself being with this guy. Now, how they broke that with the black woman and the urban woman is welfare. They displaced the father and they said, if you're a single mother, we will give you XXXXX.
A reward of some sort, basically,
A reward of some sort that generally was more than what black men were bringing home. So if you on paper were filed as a single mother and you were taking welfare,
wow,
you were bringing more home from the government than what you would have had if you had a black man in the house with you. So this kind of incentivized that whole idea of we don't need to be a nuclear family. We don't need to be a nuclear family to survive. Men ain't shit. You know, this whole gender wars thing. Now it happens with white people a lot too, but with black people it's on a whole nother level.
It is.
This whole gender wars thing. I don't need these men, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a hard working woman, which is good. I love the independent woman. But when you take it too far, these are the things that happen. We have gender wars. We have gender wars. Women still would want children, but they don't want to be married. So they see this guy that they like, okay, like I'll have his kids, but I don't want to be with them.
Think about the kids, man. I mean, this is detrimental to the kids' psyches.
But we're in a society that acts like two-parent household. The nuclear family, that's something white people made.
I mean, man.
Did you see that on social media during the elections? It was like white culture implemented this into society. They said the nuclear family is standard. And they said that's only a white thing. In most, like the white man created the nuclear family.
Gosh.
And they're trying to implement that into society. They also said being on time.
Yeah, I saw that. I heard that one. Being on time.
Being on time. It was like, I'm speaking proper. I'm like, what is going on? Man.
These are like universal truths that a nuclear family is healthy and good. Saying
normal behavior is white people stuff and barbaric behavior is black people things.
Yeah, man.
And these are the non-racist people who are putting this stuff out.
The non-racist people,
it's craziness.
Right? You think that's white liberals usually putting that stuff out?
The difference between a white liberal's racism and a white conservative white conservative's racism is when they are racist. Because I'm not saying that a conservative is always racist or a liberal is always racist. Mm-hmm. But society has this idea. That's why white people are so afraid to admit they're Republican if they are. Because society has this idea that Democrats and liberals are the good white people. They're the non-racist, and conservatives and Republicans are the mean, bad white people. They're the racists. They hate every colored person. But the difference is a conservative racist is simply that. They're just conservative. They feel like, why do I have to care about what everybody has going on? I have enough on my plate. I have my family to take care of. And I'm saying that that's what a conservative thinks. So the conservative white person would think that, why do I have to care about Black Lives Matter? Why do they have to teach my kids about critical race theory? I just want them to like think about normal stuff. I don't want them to go to school and have to learn about all these things, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. If they wanted to learn, we can talk about it at home. The liberal white racist, essentially. So let me clarify the conservative white racist a little bit more. The conservative right racist, they pretend like black people don't exist. They pretend like America's history never happened. The liberal white racist looks at black people almost like the family dog. They like you, they love you, but they don't want you to sit at the family table. You know what I mean? They don't want you making any of the big time family decisions, but you're a part of the family. Lincoln freed the slaves, but they were technically like liberals back then. Mm-hmm. They freed the slaves technically, but that's because slavery wasn't necessarily profitable anymore. Mm-hmm. They didn't need slaves at that point. And then if you look into segregation, when they took away Jim Crow and they made it illegal to segregate, they took out all the black businesses. They placed white businesses in black neighborhoods and displaced them. Mm-hmm. This was integration, right? But that killed black wealth.
Right. It's more or less breaking up the community.
Breaking up the community.
Mm-hmm. We are brought to you by Forrest Edge Tree Service. If you have trees or tree stumps on your property that you want gone, go nowhere else but Livingston County's premier tree service provider, Forrest Edge Tree Service. Your yard is no place for looming, dead, or damaged trees. It's just a matter of time before they come down, ruining your property, ruining your week, and ruining your bank account. This is exactly why you need to be a responsible adult and hire the services of Forrest Edge Tree Service. Simply give Joe Rudin a call or a text at 815-615-3037 to get a free quote today. Forrest Edge Tree Service is staffed with trained professionals who use cutting-edge equipment to get the job done right every time. Their cleanup is top-notch, they're fully insured, and their customers are always pleased with the jobs that they do, which is why they've earned a reputation of being Livingston County's premier tree service provider. So keep your family, pets, vehicles, and neighbors safe and save yourself from a world of headaches when you call or text Forrest Edge Tree Service to get those dangerous, looming, troublesome trees off of your property. That's Forrest Edge Tree Service, Livingston County's premier tree service provider.
So a liberal racist's job is to liberally say, oh, we're here to help you out and build your community, but they're really there to just fuck shit up. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And then they're to put on a face, but they're really there to just fuck shit up. let's look at what happened with the Asian community. Asians during coronavirus, allegedly there was a spike in Asian hate.
Allegedly. I like that you said that.
Because I got a couple of questions on that. But allegedly there was a spike in Asian hate. And in 3 weeks of hate crimes against Asian people, they were awarded an Asian hate crime bill.
Yeah, some official legislation of some sort.
But after a whole year of Black Lives Matter, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Nancy Pelosi and the rest of her Democratic squad that were in the Capitol building last year, kneeling on the floor with kente, African scarves around their neck. Did you see that?
Man.
Like,
I didn't see that.
You didn't see it?
I'm glad I didn't.
That's the stuff they do.
It's a whole lot of virtue signaling, isn't it?
It's a whole lot of virtue signaling.
It's pathetic,
A whole lot of symbolism. And then
Yeah.
what it does to black people is they believe, oh, finally, there's like some like white person is here to take care of the rest of the evil white people, and things will finally be better for us. And it's a cycle every 4 years.
Sure.
And then so 1 year comes and goes. A year later, the same Joe Biden who campaigned off of black people to get into office, because those are the people that got him into office.
Okay.
Campaigned off of black people to get him into office. He campaigned off of them because of the hatred, because of the pain, the misery that has been passed down to black people in this country for so long. Campaigned off of them saying, I will make a difference.
I'll help you.
I'll help you. Got into office. He helps Asian Americans who only saw extreme hate for a month because of the whole coronavirus. Allegedly, again, extreme hate for a month over the whole coronavirus thing. He gives them an anti-hate crime bill. But what does he give black people? Juneteenth.
A statue of George Floyd.
A statue of George Floyd. Wow. So it's
Right.
basically like, okay, you get this, you get tangibles, and you get this nice little, because I know you like Derrick Rose, so you get this Derrick Rose poster that you can you can put up in your room. You know what I mean?
Is that insulting to you?
It's very insulting.
As it
It's
should be.
very
As
insulting
it should be.
when you're, I don't want to say knowledgeable, but because there's so many college educated people who would see something like Juneteenth and then get excited over it.
Well, they're indoctrinated by
They
the
are indoctrinated.
very liberal professors at universities.
They are indoctrinated, and that's the key. And that is the key. They're indoctrinated to keep accepting symbolism and think that's taking us somewhere.
Wow.
When all that's doing is, hey, we're no different from the conservatives that you hate so much, but here's a cookie and a kiss on the cheek for you to forget about it. You know? And then that's why I like this whole, in the last election, there was a big rise in the Libertarian Party. A lot of the American public is starting to look into that because there's been this whole connotation for years that, oh, third party doesn't exist. Third party doesn't matter.
Right.
Who said that, though? Like, who taught you that? That right there is indoctrination. Just, oh, third party doesn't matter. And pass. But if 80% of Americans vote third party, that means who wins? Not Republicans or Democrats. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they've indoctrinated us to think that third party doesn't matter. Third party doesn't matter. But if everybody says third party doesn't matter, then yeah, third party doesn't matter. But why does third party not matter? Because they only present to you two choices.
Right.
But you do not have to choose those two choices. And this was a time in the election. Now, I don't think there was anyone who was actually a Trump fan other than his crazy Trump supporters.
Right. It's hard to applaud his character.
It's hard to applaud his character, and it's hard to applaud some of the things he did.
Sure.
In Joe Biden, I don't think there was anybody who was a Joe Biden supporter.
I think you're right.
So that goes to tell some like Americans.
You're right. You're right.
That was an opportunity for us to stop acting like dickheads and realize that they're manipulating all of us.
Yeah.
Collectively. These people are two sides of the same coin, manipulating all of us in different ways collectively. How do they manipulate white men? White men are inherently evil. Any opinion you have, oh, that's just rooted in your egoistic, racist, misogynist white man mentality.
Oh man, it's terrible.
And they just want to put you in this box of, hey, you can't think outside of the box. You can't think for yourself. This is what you are as a white man. Shut up. As a black guy, what did they do? You can't think for yourself. You can't challenge the liberal establishment. Are you kidding me? The liberals are the ones fighting for you. If not for the Democrats, et cetera, you won't have the rights you have today. They put you in a box. They don't want you to think for yourself.
You're absolutely right.
Who is creating that pressure? Who's creating that pressure on white women, on white men? Who's creating that pressure on black men? Who's creating this pressure that is on women? It's coming from the people at the top to distract all of us collectively so they can continue to do their own thing. And then we're fighting each other and we're not even paying attention on who we're actually supposed to be fighting.
Do you think this is this is coming from ultimately political elites?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
For the sake of continuing their, financial transferring and stuff, like transferring money and stuff, just to keep us all mad at each other. Why do you think that's happening, I guess?
So essentially, if you keep a country mad at there's some structures in capitalism that are really ugly. I'm a supporter of capitalism. I do believe that a free market is a positive thing. Mm-hmm. I do believe that man should have the option to choose how they want to live their means. Mm-hmm. But however, there are some evil things in capitalism. And there are evil things in capitalism that are causing some very disgusting problems. And we are distracted from a lot of those disgusting problems because we are bickering at each other's throats. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people don't understand that Republicans and Democrats are the same people. They just have the same people with the same agenda. They just have two different ways of going about it. So these people distract us and they have us at our throat constantly. Because in America, in capitalism, what creates a law? Do you think Joe Biden has the power to write this law into stone and make it legislation?
Right, no.
No. Do you think Joe Biden, his words alone is what got him into office and got him behind the Oval Office?
No.
No. It's the people who are behind the scenes who are campaigning, who are funding Joe Biden's campaign to get him on TV, to get to tour all over the world, to tour all over the country, to speak in front of these rallies. These people are giving Joe Biden money so Joe Biden can then push legislation that benefits their companies. And what benefits their companies is some very evil and sick things. And both liberals and Democrats do this. But they do it they have the same agenda, which is to make money for the ultimate capitalist, the businessman. That's it. Same agenda, make money for the ultimate capitalist, the businessman at the top. And then they distract us by saying, look at what we're doing and look at what they're not doing. Look at what we're doing and look at what they're not doing. And this last election was the time for us Americans to say, no, look at what you're both doing and look at what you're both not doing. Mm-hmm. And then that's where the distraction comes in because we're over here saying stupid libtards, racist conservatives, and we're not looking at the bigger picture. Once you found out somebody was a conservative, they're racist. Once you found somebody was a liberal, they're soft and weak and they're retarded. Mm-hmm. But why? Who's creating that culture? Who's creating those ideas that for you to just say that and not talk to that person? Because a lot of times when you talk to the person who has an opposite view of you, you realize where problems are coming from. Mm-hmm. Okay. You realize where problems are coming from. So they don't want us to talk to each other. They want us bickering. They want us fighting. So we don't point to them.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that civil dialogue between people that disagree on certain issues is hugely important. But like you said, there's an incentive from the higher-ups, the political higher-ups, to not talk almost. And I see it more in liberal circles, but I'm surely biased, where you shouldn't dare talk to someone who has a differing view from you. Like you see Charlie Kirk or one of these guys, Crowder, going out trying to talk to people, get their opinions. Don't talk to him. Don't talk to him. Stay away from him. It's like that's doing no one any favors. Civil dialogue between people that have differing views is the key to progress forward, I think
liberals in America have created the ultimate cult.
Think so?
Liberals have created the ultimate cult. Like that whole idea of that idea of not talking to him. Mm-hmm. So this last election, I really got to just understand the mentality of some of these extreme liberals. So I post a lot on my social media and I'm very strong-willed on how I feel about things. And I'm not afraid to call out liberals on their racism.
Right.
So I was very anti-Black Lives Matter during last April not last April, but 2020 April, when the whole George Floyd thing went down. Very, very anti-Black Lives Matter, because it just seems like every time a black man dies by police, they just come around, they create a buzz, they make money, and they make money off of this buzz, and they leave.
Right.
And then the next time a black guy dies, they come in, create a buzz, make money off of the buzz, and they leave. Mm-hmm. So then I started to question it. Who is Black Lives Matter working for? All these white kids that were posting their black squares.
Dude, did you post a black square?
I did not post a black square.
Okay, it seemed like everyone did that, and I'm just like,
I did not. I don't
know that I'm convinced enough.
What are we doing? Why are we posting black squares?
Virtue signaling, man. It's virtue signaling. Look, I'm not racist. Look, trust me. I posted the square. I did my little part without actually doing anything. Yeah. No, seriously.
I did my part without actually doing anything at all.
Yes.
Like, that's what I'm saying. And it's just essentially, when it comes to a white liberalism, they're starting to create a paternal culture over black people.
Oh, wow.
And if you talk to what I mean by paternal is like they almost believe that it's their responsibility to take care of you, even if you think otherwise and tell them otherwise. Mm-hmm. So I will post stuff on my stories about how I'm very anti-Black Lives Matter. I'm very anti-Democratic Party. I'm not a big fan of Barack Obama. And then white kids would swipe up and they'd message me and they'd say stuff like, white liberals, and they say stuff like, why do you hate black people? Aren't you black?
Wow, dude. They're indoctrinated again. Yeah.
I'm like, aren't you black? I'm like, what gives you the idea that I hate black people? They say, well, you don't support Black Lives Matter. I'm like, Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with black people. Just because you put black in just because you say black in something, you automatically think that has to do with black people. It has nothing to do with black people.
The organization picked a heck of a name, because if you dare not like anything about them,
you don't think Black Lives Matter?
Exactly.
They did this strategically. You
know
what I mean?
For sure.
If you challenge the group, people say that you're challenging all black. It just makes no sense.
So you don't think Black Lives Matter, huh? You don't like that. That's crazy.
It made no sense. And they did it brilliantly. So when I would talk to some of these white liberals, and I tell them stuff like, yeah, Black Lives Matter, that's kind of a scam. It started off genuine, but then money got involved and politics got involved, and they just turned it into this wagon of how they can get attention from people, essentially, and convert that into power, and then ditch the whole reason that Black Lives Matter existed in the first place. Mm-hmm. So look at the election of last year. What was Joe Biden talking about for the majority of the time?
If you're asking me to recall, let's see here. What was he talking about? He was really preaching. He was really preaching a lot to the black community, I would say, and minority communities. A lot. And I mean a lot because, I'm a Mexican guy, and I noticed an awful lot of like sympathy coming to the Mexican community. It was just unwarranted.
It was cringy.
Cringy. So cringy, dude. Like this whole, even like with calling Mexican people or any Latin people Latinx, Mexicans do not call one another Latinx. Like the only people saying Latinx are white liberals.
Yeah, I hate that.
It's so annoying. It's like, dude, I want no part of that, and I don't really affiliate. My identity is not in my race. I'm only part Mexican,
so
anyways.
Race oriented, and that's
I know.
okay.
Identity politics,
Identity
man.
is important. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. Identity is important. It's good to bracket identity just so we can culturalize and understand that there's other places in the world other than just America, and that's supposed to be the beauty. Identity is important, but the way liberals are doing it is they're weaponizing identity against each other, so they can then use some of the people who identify as whatever, black, people who identify as anything of a minority, essentially, so they can create these minority groups and just create extra support for them. And that's all it is. So back to the Black Lives Matter thing. Mm-hmm. I remember I would post stuff on my story, and it was mainly white girls.
Dude, they're outspoken as heck, man. They're loud.
They're crazy. Those white liberal girls.
You're right. And we're going to offend a lot of people in this, you know that?
But yeah. So with them, whenever I post stuff on my story, I'd be like, I'm not a fan of Black Lives Matter. They'd be like, what? Do you not like black people? You're black yourself. And I try to explain to them about how it is just an organization that uses and manipulates black people. But they got offended. They would block me sometimes because I was all simply explaining what Black Lives Matter and how what they see is nothing but smoke and mirrors. Mm-hmm. So the way I looked at it is like, essentially, I'm raining on their parade.
Right.
I'm raining on their parade. I'm saying, I'm sorry, all of these white organizations that are supposed to be for black people that you support so much, because I know it makes you feel good to fight for black people, because deep down inside you are a racist. just like you're coming at these conservatives, because what do? Subconsciously, we hate the people. We hate people for things that we know about ourselves that we stuff deep down. So white liberals are looking at white conservatives. Oh, these racist white people. Oh my God, these white men. But when you get an opportunity to fight for black people, and then black people try to explain to you how your fight is not necessarily helping and we don't need you to help, you get offended. Mm-hmm. Why would you get offended if you're telling somebody, I don't need you to help me? That's because you in your head believe that you are above this person and you are in a position you have to help them.
I think you nailed it on the head right there, man.
That's the vibe and energy I used to get from white liberals.
Absolutely.
I would try to explain to them, like, listen, Black Lives Matter isn't exactly what it seems. Oh, you just don't like black people. Oh, you're an African. You're not an actual African American. You grew up with all white. It was always excuses to say, I'm not actually black. Essentially.
Did that hurt when you had that said to you growing up? It hurt
at first, and it used to make me very angry. Mm-hmm. And I used to be really bitter about it. I felt racism. It was like feeling racism that nobody cared about. Because that is racist. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, so I'm no longer a black person because I don't have the popular black opinion.
Right, isn't that crazy?
Yes.
You don't fit the narrative. You don't have the exact same opinions and everything. You don't like what we like, think how we think.
So my question is, do you actually care about black people, or do you only care about black people when we think like you? Mm-hmm. And it's the latter. They only care about black people when we think like them. Because liberals have never liked police. Think about it like this whole idea of defunding the police, again, that's just wagoning off of the support of black people after they get all of this attention from the whole Black Lives Matter thing. And then they can use that to then, quote unquote, start defunding the police slowly but surely. If you look into history, liberals have never liked authority. That's what a liberal is. They've never liked authority. They've never liked excessive.
They want to be liberated. They don't want to be oppressed by a governing body.
They don't want to be oppressed by government. They want to be liberated. They want to be assisted by government, but they don't want to be oppressed by government. They want to be liberated. Right. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So if you study in the history of a liberal, you will see that there were aspects of society when liberals were very anti-police. Very anti-police. So the question is, are they still anti-police today? And is that something they've still been fighting for all these years, and they've just found a new way to usher that in through Black Lives Matter? And then will black people actually benefit off of this defunding the police? So again, this is just another avenue of them to manipulate black people into using black people for them to get something for themselves. And then once black people help them out, they'll toss them a little cookie.
Yeah. Huh.
It's consistent but constant.
Which should be very offensive if someone listening is black, you know. That should be offensive that they would, because your analogy with the throwing them a cookie, giving them a kiss on the cheek, it's actually fairly accurate. They give them little things to. I can't stop thinking about the Asian hate crime bill being passed and then getting a statue of George Floyd. It's just enough to keep you occupied for a while, to, you know. Just
enough to make you a little happy about something.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Show you that we haven't forgotten about you.
Right.
And then for a community of people who have been consistently forgotten for so long in America, if you show them that you haven't forgotten about them for a little bit, that's going to be appealing for some of these people. Because they're not used to getting anything. They're not used to getting shit. So Think about it like this.
We are brought to you by Once and Again in Pontiac and Fairbury, Illinois. Once and Again is a remarkable resale shop that sells and consigns pre-owned name brand clothing and shoes for your entire family. This year they celebrate 20 years of business serving our local community and beyond. Once and Again also has a great selection of pre-owned, authentic designer handbags without that designer price tag. Once and Again has an ever-changing inventory of name brands in their spacious locations in both Fairbury and Pontiac. Along with their tag color clearance system, shopper rewards, and other promotions, they have prices that truly will fit any budget. Once and Again is open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you can also shop online too at their website, onceandagain.com. That's once, the letter N, again.com. For more information about consignment or brands or for directions to their stores, you can again visit onceandagain.com. That's Once and Again in Pontiac and Fairbury, Illinois.
I'm going to use a pimp analogy. Okay. Pimps and prostitutes. So somebody used the same analogy for this situation, and I liked it. So think about a pimp, and a pimp is the Democrats, and then the prostitute are black people. A pimp doesn't want anything from his woman other than you get out there, you make me money. And every now and then when I'm horny and I don't have other women to mess with, I'll mess with you. Mm-hmm. And that's the relationship between a pimp and a prostitute. Does the pimp show the prostitute any sort of legitimate respect? No. How does the pimp continue to get the prostitute's loyalty? Because the prostitute originally has low self-esteem. So that's how he was even able to recruit her in the first place. Mm-hmm. Say, oh, I'll take care of you. Just come with me. All these other dudes are terrible. Come to Big Daddy. Big Daddy will help you. He'll take care of you. This is how pimps talk to prostitutes and manipulate them. Because these prostitutes come from trauma. The pimps know this. Black people come from trauma through slavery. And then after slavery, they're just told to be free. And you figure it out from there. And that was only 150 years ago. What's 150 years? Like 4 generations? You know what I mean? Imagine if your great grandpa was a slave and one day someone just told him to be free.
You wouldn't know what to do. You'd have no idea. It's a totally
4 generations
new world.
later, you'd still be kind of lost. You'd still be trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? Especially if you didn't have money in your family. So these people were just told to be free after slavery. So the Democratic Party is the pimp, and then the black American black community is the prostitute. How do you speak to a prostitute? Usually, a pimp's not going to speak to a prostitute like he speaks to his wife. No, he's going to speak to somebody who he knows needs them. You heard Joe Biden. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Right. Yeah.
They literally see black people as their prostitutes because that's what we've been for the last 50 years. What is a prostitute? Is the exchange rate equal between a pimp and a prostitute? The prostitute goes to sleep with a dude, gets like $400 from it. She gives the pimp back like $350 probably, something like that. It's not equal. They campaign off of black people for an entire year, talking about what they're going to do for black people, how they're going to push black people forward. The elections come around, black people vote for the Democrats in drones. I'm talking like 94% of the black community will vote blue every year in drones. The loyalty is one I've never seen before. In drones. Elections are over. We get the Democratic candidate in. Nothing happens.
Right.
Nothing happens. And just like a pimp and a prostitute. So the exchange, I'm going to use and manipulate you and milk you for everything you have. And then I'm going to give you a kiss on the cheek. And when a prostitute got to get a little smart and she's like, you don't treat me right, I'm going to leave you. What does the pimp do? Oh, come on, baby. Like, you know, I love you. Gives her a little kiss, gives her some flowers, probably takes her out to dinner. And because she has low self-esteem, that kiss, those flowers, and that dinner date, that does it for her. That cancels all the times he beat her, all the times he used her, he manipulated her, he called her out of her name. She's forgotten about all of that. And then he's gonna start doing that stuff again, and she's gonna get a little smart and get a little sad and be like, "Oh, you don't treat me right." He's gonna do the same. "Oh, baby, you know I treat you right." Kiss her on the cheek, just like a pimp and a prostitute.
A pimp to his prostitute. In order to keep the prostitute, you can't let them get empowered either.
You can't let them get empowered. What kind of a pimp tells what kind of a pimp goes home and tells his prostitute, "Hey, yes, fill out this job application. I think it'll be great for you." I've never heard of a pimp who does that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
or you're
just
totally
like,
capable of doing something amazing with your life. You can
Exactly.
go start a business. You're a
You can
great,
go- exactly.
great work ethic. You go make something of your life. No, it's
Exactly.
like, you need my help.
You need my help.
I think so.
The
What do you think of
consistent
this?
speaking down, the consistent dumbing down, the consistent indoctrinating
Yeah.
society to see black people as under white people. They flipped it. So in the 50s, the 60s, they used to see black people as innately less than white people. Like they come out of the womb, ain't shit.
Like there's something different in the brain or
different
something.
than them. There's something different, you know. That's how they used to teach white people to believe they were better than black people. Now, how are they doing it? Oh, you are born with privilege. Paul, you are born with privilege. You are born with white male privilege DNA. It is your responsibility to go out there and fight for these people. But when you do that enough, what does that do for these white kids? That puts them here. That puts black kids here.
Yes, critical race theory in a nutshell, right?
That puts black kids here.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting and then critical race theory, when you're sitting in that classroom and it did not make me feel good as a black kid. Now, granted, I did go to a majority white school and I was like the only black kid in most of my classes, but it did not make me feel good to sit there and read about, in the history book about slavery, and I'm the only black kid there. And I'm just consistently seeing all these negative stories about black people, all this misery about black people. You hit me up the other week and you said, "Zay, I didn't even know that Tulsa, Oklahoma existed." No shit, you didn't, because it's a positive story.
Wait, what are you talking? What's Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Oklahoma, I think you did. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Remember Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Was that not you?
I don't think that was me. I messaged you about who was that other black activist?
Malcolm X. You
Yes,
did.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
maybe I mixed that up. Then somebody else messaged me about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they're like, "Say, I didn't even know Tulsa, Oklahoma existed." I'm like, "Of course you didn't. It's a positive story." So
Right.
Tulsa, Oklahoma was essentially like Manhattan Wall Street, where the free market is, where you can buy and sell stocks. So before black people were allowed to buy and sell stocks and build businesses, they did it for themselves, and they set it up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There were hundreds of black businesses that were making millions of dollars. The black businesses, I think, they were the ones that came together, and they were the ones that were able to build the Negro leagues, the baseball league, and then off of the Negro leagues, they used to promote their businesses. Black millionaires were being generated off of Tulsa, Oklahoma. In that whole community, there were 6 black men who owned airplanes in 5 years after the airplane was invented. Or not, that was not 5 years. It was 50 years after the airplane was invented, and barely anybody had it. Nobody had an airplane. There were no commercial airplanes. Only rich dudes had airplanes, right? And this was 1921, and you had 5 black men who had airplanes. That's craziness.
Yeah.
So in Tulsa, Oklahoma, these people are starting to make money. They're starting to be independent. This is scary for the 1920 racist white people. They don't want black people independent because they don't want black people to get more power than them in their own country. So they came down and they tore the whole community to shreds. So all of the businesses, all of the institutions and industries that were in Tulsa, Oklahoma were gone. In one day, they burnt it down. And this was Tulsa, Oklahoma. So he hit me up. He's like, "I didn't know Tulsa, Oklahoma existed." And I'm like, "Of course you didn't, because Tulsa, Oklahoma is an empowering story." A little black kid is going to read that in his history book and be like, "Wow, black people created all of this. Like, that's crazy. I can do that too." But what do black kids see? Misery. You have a 50% chance of going to jail if you're black. I get that. I do get that. But it's the way that we are teaching these students as if it is fact. as if you're a black man, you are bound to go to jail. If you're a black man, you are bound to not have a successful life. And I don't like that, because that essentially, it looks like you want to educate and you want to create awareness, but that's a double-edged sword. What they're really doing is, I believe, they're indoctrinating, because it takes a very strong person, especially a kid. It takes a strong person to see, wow, most black people don't live successful lives. I guess I'm just gonna be mediocre and hope for the best. That's that's how most people are gonna react to it, right?
Yeah, it's simply natural.
It's simply natural. So they're putting something that's natural, and they're saying, oh, we're trying to help create awareness. No, you're not. What I think you're actually trying to do is, I think you're trying to indoctrinate people into just seeing themselves as less than, and indoctrinate other people into seeing themselves as greater than.
And it's interesting that you say that, because we'll say like white liberal types that really support critical race theory and, teaching the negative stories, I guess, and talking about just how bad blacks have had it in this country. They think that it's good. They truly do think that it's a good thing. It's helpful. Their intentions are good. Yeah. Regardless of their intentions, though, I think it will probably have negative effects on kids' confidence, black kids' confidence, and everything.
Because there's this whole culture within the black community that we don't act on something until the white liberal on CNN and MSNBC says this is important. And last year, there were 1,000 black people who died from gun violence in the city of Chicago. Hundreds of others in bigger cities like New York, like Detroit. How often do you hear about those stuff on the national news? Why isn't that a national crisis?
You're right. The majority of the time, it's black on black too, isn't it? Yeah.
And let me touch on black. People hate that term, black on black.
Okay.
Because they make it. Now I say black on black, and I believe people hate that term, black on black, because they've been indoctrinated to. That's another way for them to. That's another way for them to ignore the reality of, yes, there is black on black violence. Not because black people are inherently violent, is because they've been stuffed into a violent situation, and it's a cycle. And that's what we need to be talking about more. Not the one cop that comes around every second month and kills a black kid, and maybe 20 collectively die the entire year. Let's focus on the 15,000 that die the entire year for black on black violence. And this is why I believe it is racist when they ignore the black on black violence, is because it's stemming from the same thing as police brutality. It's stemming from the same thing as police brutality. And that essentially is the racism and the inequality in America. Now, because if African Americans weren't slaves for 400 years, if they weren't slaves literally only like 200 years ago, they'd be in a better position. People's great grandfathers were living in the Jim Crow times. Not grandpas, I'm sorry. We're living in Jim Crow times. Think about that. Like, what if your grandpa was in Jim Crow, Alabama? You kidding me? You won't necessarily be where you are today, probably, because your grandpa was in a position where he was able to raise your parents to get to the position to be able to raise you to be the person you are today, right? But if you're living in an era where black people are literally targeted, the whole idea of black people being targeted today, we can discuss that. But in 1955, I hope that's not a discussion for anybody about black people being targeted. When black people were literally being targeted, imagine your grandpa growing up in that time, and him having a kid, barely having shit to give to that kid, and that kid barely has anything when he has you. You know what I mean? And this is a cycle that's continuing. So you're in Chicago, you're getting the worst education because, again, property taxes fund education. This property in a lot of these Chicago hoods are terrible because nobody goes over there and buys them and fixes and flips the property. Right. So the property taxes are low. They get a shitty education. They don't necessarily know how to assimilate into corporate America. They don't know how to make money. They don't know how to make a living. What do? They see the few black men in their poor neighborhood who have something. And what do? Oh yeah, I sell drugs and I gangbang.
Right.
And
So
then
it's
you
like,
look
well,
on
I
the
guess that
TV,
tells me what I should
and then
do.
this is why it comes back around. You look on the TV, how many successful black doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs do you get to see on TV?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. They're out there, but the
Yep.
TV doesn't come around to come talk to them. They come around to come talk to the babies. They come around to come talk to the Migos. And then these black kids that don't have a lot of educational opportunities, don't have a lot of real male role models. They see the Migos, they see the baby, and they see the success that these black men are having, and they're like, as a black man, that's how I have to act to be something. So essentially, yes, it encourages that the gang life behavior, and a lot of these people are going to jail. The whole jail system is recycled. It's a big chain, big chain of different stations, all manipulated to do the same thing, and that's to keep black people at the bottom. Now, here's the difference. I'm not the black person to say, oh, white people are so mean and this and that. I am the black person to say, okay, well, if that's what they're doing, why don't we just put more of a cultural awareness on this is what these rich, powerful white people at the top are doing, and then we can fight it from within. So I'm the guy that says stop paying attention to the police officers that are killing us and start paying attention to the thousands of black men who are manipulated by the racist system to kill each other.
How are they manipulated by the racist system to kill each other? I mean, I maybe have an idea of, sorry to cut you off on what you were saying. Why is it the system's fault that they are killing each other?
The system, I won't say is, if you pull the trigger, it's your fault. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of the whole idea of somebody else loaded up the gun and you pulled the trigger.
Okay.
So they're pushed into a position where they have to pull the trigger. You know what I mean? They have to pull the trigger, but the system is what loaded up the gun. So again, their grandpa was growing up in Jim Crow times. The grandpa didn't have any opportunity to make anything of himself. Not a dime to call his own. He has his own kid in his child's time. It's a little bit better. That child has a kid. It's a little bit better than it was for his dad. But essentially, where does that still put the third generation kid?
Yeah, still below where he would have otherwise been
still below where he should be.
I get it, yeah.
So, and then you look around, you don't see any successful black men, and the only successful black men, just think about what you would do. You seem pretty ambitious. You put together this whole setup. You have big ambitions in life.
Sure.
Think about your average ambitious young boy who, how am I going to start something when I don't even have $1 to my name? How am I going to start something when I can't even get a job because I don't really have that good of an education, and I speak a certain way because everybody around me speaks this way. And this dialect is what I know. This dialect is what I'm exposed to. So when I go out for job interviews, my dialect isn't gonna be up to par to what the employer wants. They're gonna write me off.
And you're referring to people speaking with that kind of inner city slang type of talking.
Essentially,
I heard it's offensive to say it's vernacular, but that's what I know it as. You know, street sounding talk.
They call it offensive because that's all the slaves knew. Because slaves couldn't read, they couldn't they couldn't communicate with white people. They couldn't communicate with educated people at the time, so they just didn't know how to speak. How to speak properly. And generation after generation after generation of many of the same things, a lot of people still, as sad as it sounds like, still talk like what the slaves would have sounded like. You know what I mean? And they're trying to go out for a job interview. Are you kidding me? Not much of a chance, right? And that's not the only thing. It's also a lot of times the stereotypes those people have to face. And it is a lot harder for them just to get a job. There are no businesses in these people's neighborhood. They have to walk out of their own neighborhoods if you go into the hood, there are no Jewel Oscos just sitting in the corner that little 14 and 15-year-olds can go apply for jobs. There are no Jewel Oscos. There are no Kohl's. There are no Jimmy John's, Right. It's liquor stores. If you go into a hood, there's a liquor store on every corner and everything torn down and beaten down. They have to get on the train just to get out of their own neighborhood. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they have to get on a train just to get out of their neighborhood, just to go to the Jewel to be able to get that job. A lot of these kids, did you have a car at 14? Chances are a broke black kid definitely doesn't have a car to get out of the neighborhood and go to the job. So just a lot of different things that are just making it difficult for them to live that normal teenage life that we lived in the suburbs. You know what I mean? And that being said, what's in their community standing right in front of them as a way to make a decent check too, not just a check, but a decent one, is to sell drugs. And then that's the loophole that it's a trick. It's a trick. That's why I said you can't necessarily say it's white people's fault, but it still is your fault for falling for the trick. But it's a trick that a lot of people fall accustomed to.
The only reason, so I do have some hesitancy to agree with you on, chances are technically you will wind up in a position similar to the one you were raised in. If you're raised in the inner city, it's going to be awfully hard to kind of break that system, unlink yourself from that cycle and wind up somewhere else. For me though, you said I am ambitious, and I am very much so with this podcast. I definitely didn't come from any place that put me in a great spot to start out at.
Neither did I.
I mean, there are
Definitely.
black kids where I grew up that had it much better than I did when I grew up. Grew up with my mom, single mother. She wasn't around too much, really, really low income. And I think the key, though, to unlinking myself to winding up exactly like, maybe where my mom, my uncles and stuff wound up, was to have positive role models. And what do you think about that? I think role models are absolutely everything. We are brought to you by the Coffee Steamer. The Coffee Steamer is Livingston County's premier coffee joint. Their trailer in Fairbury boasts delicious and decadent coffee drinks, teas, and smoothies, while their full-service cafe in Forrest has all that, plus tons of incredible baked goods, sandwiches, and salads. Life is just too short to drink bad coffee, so head on over to the Coffee Steamer and start your mornings or your afternoons off right.
Role models are key.
Yeah.
Role models are key. But like I said, if the culture is telling you, this guy who wears nice, this dude who dresses clean, who's clean shaven, well spoken, works hard, has big ambitions in life. If the culture is telling you he's corny,
yeah, okay.
And then this guy who's over here, who wears his pants at his knees, who looks like an idiot, who doesn't really see life further than tomorrow, probably through no fault of his own, because it's very hard to grow up in those situations.
Sure.
Probably through no fault of his own that he sees life no further than tomorrow. If the culture is telling you that this is the guy you want to be, that's going to push more young boys to be guy B. You know what I mean? That's going to push more boys to be guy B, and that's going to essentially create less positive role models. There are many positive role models out there for black kids, but they're just not chosen by the media. The media either chooses people who promote irresponsibility and reckless lifestyles, or chooses people who are Democratic politicians. You won't see nobody else on national television unless you align with those three things: an athlete, a musician, or a Democratic politician. Really, if you just sit here, or a comedian, if you really just sit here and think about it, you can't think, how many black Mark Cubans do you see?
Right.
There are black Mark Cubans out there, but they don't get invited to be on CNN. You know what I mean? They don't get invited to be at the award ceremonies. It's that's how it is, because they don't, that image of the black man, the independent black man, the conservative independent black man, they don't want you to see that. They want you to see, if you are successful and doing well, that's a Democratic politician. They're okay with that because you're assisting them in their agenda.
Right, you're right. You're absolutely right.
They're assisting them in their agenda. But they're not okay with you being independent, intellectually independent, financially independent. That's what they're mainly scared of. But when you put those two together, you become a threat to the liberal establishment. Yeah. Intellectually independent and financially independent.
And you will get no airtime.
No airtime. When was the last time you saw Kanye West on anything?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Besides Joe Rogan,
Besides,
a podcast,
because Joe
it's a
Rogan
free
is
thinking podcast.
he's just a great dude. He's not with the bullshit. You know, he's a free thinker, and he's a free thinker. He's not one of those crazy white liberals, and that's what we all need to be as Americans, because that's what gets us places.
Yep.
Now, Joe Rogan easily could have been one of those white people who are going to label Kanye West as a racist that doesn't like black people. White people labeling other black people as a racist who does. Wasn't it crazy when they were calling Kanye West a coon? All of this because he was simply making insane observations, insane, strong, sound observations. Because that's what scares them. They don't want black people to be independent and thinking for themselves. And Kanye West also has the guap to really make them sweat. He's independent financially, and he's an independent thinker. He's independent intellectually, and that's what scares the shit out of them.
Their best bet would be to make him seem like a crazy person.
As a crazy person. Now, Kanye West is a man that speaks from a place of power. So those type of thinkers and speakers are very scary. You know, they come across unempathetic at times too. But that's because they're leaders. They see where they're going. When Kanye West, I remember it was a few years ago when Kanye West said, Harriet Tubman didn't free the slaves. Do you remember that?
No, this is sounding odd though.
Kanye West said, Harriet Tubman didn't free the slaves. She just had them go work for other white people. And then he also, you might remember this one because this one was a little bigger. He said slavery was a choice. Do you remember that one?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
I wasn't
But
up to...
on TMZ. So this was huge. He was on TMZ and he said slavery was a choice. And you can imagine the outrage from saying
Sure. Yeah.
And I understand why they would outrage. It's a very unempathetic thing to say. But when he said slavery was a choice, at the end of the day, what he was trying to say was that we could have gone to war. You know?
Technically speaking, it was a choice, I suppose, to remain enslaved.
Everything is a choice.
Sure. Everything is a choice, yeah.
Technically speaking, it was a choice. You could have gone to war and lost everything in the fight for your freedom. But we collectively chose to be there for 400 plus years and be enslaved. African leaders chose to sell their own people to these white dudes for not even for some bullshit, for some swords and guns and vases.
Is that correct? Is that how it went down? I thought they were pretty much, kidnapped.
No. African, you can't just roll up in another person's country and just...
Surely some of them were kidnapped. If you have guns and they don't, you might be able to kidnap
At this time, in the beginning of slavery, the continent of Africa was the most powerful continent in the world. And if you just look at the structure of Africa, you can understand why that would be the case. It gets the most sun. It has the most natural resources. Gas, gold, oil, coal, diamonds, lithium, all comes from Africa. The cell phones, your laptop, your TV, those cameras, this microphone, the components and the elements that are inside of these pieces of technology, they all come from Africa. A lot of our stuff wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Africa. So in the beginning of slavery, that's when they went to Africa, and these African leaders, if they didn't choose to sell their leaders, didn't choose to sell their own people to these white Europeans, that was by choice. Those leaders did it. We won't be in the position that we are in today. So when Kanye West said something like slavery was a choice, that is somebody speaking from a place of accountability to move forward. Because I don't care what the situation is. Even if you are a victim, if you want to move forward, you have to take some type of accountability. Slavery was awful. It was sick. It was vile. But what Kanye West he wants to move forward. He's a leader. He says slavery was disgusting, but at the end of the day, in every wrong situation, you played a part. This was our part. So slavery was a choice. And then this is how we can move on. We can move forward. But then, of course, liberals don't like thinkers like that, because what if you get 50 million black people thinking, yeah, slavery was a choice. We're no longer thinking like victims. We did it to ourselves. We shouldn't have sold each other to white people, and we should have fought back. So that being said, we're going to start fighting back to that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because that's the first step, accountability. Because if they are sitting here and they're treating you like a victim and saying, we're here to help you, we're here to be your provider, that puts you in a place of inferiority.
Oh, 1,000,000%. Yeah.
1,000,000%. That puts you in a place of inferiority. So Kanye saying slavery is a choice. Kanye West saying Harriet Tubman didn't actually free the slaves. That's a free-thinking black man taking accountability for our part in slavery. And then after that first step of accountability, the next step is unifying.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what they want black people to do. They don't want us to unify, because if we can unify, power will change. Mm-hmm. Power will shift for sure.
So we're talking a lot about slavery right now. And this leads me to a very interesting point that I've been dying to ask you about.
Yeah.
And we kind of alluded to it earlier a little bit as well. Your great-great-grandpa, anyone's great-great-grandpa, I believe great-great-grandpa, roughly, would have been around during the times of slavery. A big topic these days is reparations to descendants of slaves in America. I believe at one point it was reparations to blacks for reasons like systemic racism and things like that, but now I think it's kind of funneled down to reparations, financial reparations for descendants of slaves. What do you think about all that? And are you for that idea? Do you think that descendants of slaves, or maybe even black people in America, do you think that they are owed some kind of financial compensation for the sins that our ancestors, American people from way back when, white people, did against their ancestors, I guess?
The way I look at it, I mean, if you're going to compensate illegal Mexicans, why can't we compensate people that you enslaved?
Okay, illegal Mexicans, what do you mean by that? I'm a little behind, I guess.
So just like, not illegal Mexicans, but yeah, even that. Like when you have millions of Hispanics come into the country and then you prioritize them over black people, and they're not even from here.
You treat them nicely and stuff.
Treat them better. You prioritize them. You treat them. You're attending to their problems before you're attending to the problems of black people, problems that you caused. So if I'm looking at it like that, if we're gonna do that for Mexicans, why can't we do the same for black people? But in a nutshell, I do believe black people do need to be compensated.
Okay.
But is it fair for it to come from the average white American? That's something that we need to talk about, because they had nothing to do with it. These aren't the people who enslaved them. The majority of these people, it makes them sick to their stomach to even think about what happened back then.
Mm-hmm. Really quick though, I do want to just kind of clarify. You're speaking about the way that we treat illegal immigrants, say from Mexico. I agree. It's pretty wild. It's like, okay, it's illegal to come in, but once you're in, sanctuary cities will help you in all sorts of different ways. It's okay that you're here. Like, it's pretty messy, that whole thing. But the reparations for black people and descendants of slaves, I'll say, because that's what I believe it is. You have to be a descendant of a slave. Yeah. That's a different issue. Should we give a sum of money to descendants of slaves around today?
I don't know how it should be done. I don't necessarily think it should come from white Americans, because they didn't really have anything to do with it. But I think there's at least a 10 to 15 trillion dollar debt owed to black Americans. Just
dispersed among black Americans? You're saying black Americans, yes. Just descendants of slaves?
Descendants of slaves. Because Africans like myself, African immigrants like myself, yes, we are black. Yes, we do share a lot of the same problems. Yes, we do. Because look at the state of the continent of Africa. It doesn't look like that because they're lazy and they're unintelligent. Africans are some of the most intelligent people you ever meet in your life. If it was with their will, Africa would be the most beautiful, richest continent. It would look like Dubai times 50 by now. If with all of the resources they have in that continent, if they got to keep it and build their continent on their own, it'll look like Dubai times 50.
Why doesn't it look like Dubai?
Because you have white nations, white supremacist nations like France, like England, who have been coming into Africa for centuries, who've been looting the resources for pennies by the dollar. looting the resources for pennies by the dollar, taking it back to their European countries, America's part of it as well, and looting Africa, essentially robbing from them. Mm-hmm. And that's why Africa looks like it does. Because how does a country make money? Trade. Africa has so much to trade, but what are you going to make? How are you going to make that money if people are stealing everything you have to trade? And how are you going to stop that? How are you going to stop them from stealing it when your army looks like a couple of guys in flannels and 2 AK-47s when we're talking about nukes?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's interesting you said intelligent people, there's plenty of them in Africa. Elon Musk is an African American. I just kind of realized that.
Is he really?
He's from Africa. He's from Northern Africa.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but it just goes to show, people might think, people listening to this, when they think of Africa, they might think, sand, unfertile dirt, and huts and stuff.
African people are so intelligent. Mm-hmm. So intelligent. The minimum, if you actually go to Africa, they have nothing, but the kids are so bright when they come here. They come here, they are smarter than a lot of kids in their classrooms. And people are shocked. Because they're like, wait, I thought Africa was like really poor and like people.
Yeah, you hear kids starving in Africa. Finish your plate.
Starving, yeah. Kids are starving. Like they think that's what Africa is, but then they come here and they're blown away by how intelligent some of these people are. Mm-hmm. And the state of Africa is in that state because they've been robbed, they've been looted for so many centuries.
Okay. So let's talk about these reparations, though. So you do think that there is a debt that is owed from maybe the federal government, or do you think it's from the American people? Really, the federal government's money is taxpayer money anyways.
People, exactly. So either way, it's the same idea. That's why I said it's going to be something that we'll have to collectively talk about, because and this will be a way to test all those liberals to see if they truly care. Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's a fair point.
If they truly care, if you truly care, then cut those checks.
Right?
How about that? Just anyone who says they care, cut some checks. Because if each white family can cut a check of like $250 because you care so much, that can accumulate to something.
I think you would find that the people that are so adamant and they're pro
won't be so adamant anymore.
Exactly. I think so. When the stuff gets real, it's like, okay, we appreciate your support for the past few years. You're a diehard supporter.
Gets real, let's see if you'll still be around.
Exactly.
The black squares. That's real easy.
The black squares.
Black squares are real easy, and sharing bullshit on Instagram is real easy. But when it gets to the real nitty gritty, and when it's time to put your money where your mouth is, let's see if they're still around.
Yes. So, but my thing is where white people and where just people in general will get hung up on the whole idea of reparations is, I didn't do anything to
reasonably
you.
So.
Yes, or a white person. I hesitate to say myself because I'm not white. Mm-hmm. I'm not white. I'm fair complected, but
you'll be perceived as a white person in society.
Dude, I've been perceived as both. It's so weird. I've had people come up to me and tell me, because I am not person of color, because I'm a Latino, I've actually the system is plotted against me. I'm under the gun because I'm Latino. I'm systematically, I'm at a disadvantage and I'm owed something. That is wildly offensive to me. It's like, are you kidding me? I've never had an instance of racism in my life. Mm-hmm. My ethnicity has not in any way worked against me. So it's really weird.
You see white people who do that?
Always.
They want to put you under this place.
Yes, I'm like, don't you even think for 1 second.
I remember there was this white girl that me and my friend, this other white dude, and we were talking. She saw some of my Snapchats, and she asked me if she was like, "You're not from like Chicago, are you?" I'm like, she was like, "You grew up in the suburb, didn't you?" She was like, "Yeah, how do you know?" I can just tell based off of the stuff you say on social media. I'm like, "Why is that?" She says, "Cause it seems like you're a Trump supporter. Like real black people would never be a Trump supporter." I'm like, "What?"
Oh my
She's
gosh!
Like, black people from the city would never be a Trump supporter. I'm like, first of all, I'm not a Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. I just think Trump is better than Joe Biden. That's all it is. And second of all, a lot of the things you see is a lot of smoke and mirror And as I'm explaining it, she's like, no, shut up and listen.
Wow.
I kid you not. And this is coming from a white person.
Dude, it's weird.
Telling
They
me
can get
to
crazy.
shut up and listen about my social issues.
Yeah.
It's like, do you actually care about black people, or do you just want to maintain control over black people? In this past election, from what I was seeing, it really just felt like a lot of control maintenance over black people, other than anything else.
Yeah. And I think those people, like that white girl that was yelling at you, it might not be so much that she at least knowingly wants to maintain control or something like that. It's people have a real hesitancy. They really don't like when someone promotes an idea that is contrary to what they've always believed. It's tough to learn something new that's totally different.
But then that's what exposes them, because if you truly cared, you would give a damn about what your opinion was.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. It's rare to find people like that.
You're trying to solve the problem. It's not rare. There's so many white people I've talked to, and like they can think one thing 1 second, and I tell them another thing, something else, and they're just listening. They ask more questions because they want to know my perspective as a black man.
Yeah.
But when you're a white liberal who quote unquote cares, you don't give a damn what I think, as long if it's anything other than what you're used to, if it's anything other than defund the police and Black Lives Matter and all that, and all of those same rhetoric that essentially just empowers the democratic movement and never black people.
It takes a humble human being, though, to be willing to change their long-held opinions based on the facts. I always try to be where I will hold opinions. How do I say this? I'll try to believe whatever the facts lead me to believe, even if that means uprooting my long-held beliefs. Like something with politics, if I think that I'm not against reparations, I don't owe anything to the black community. I owe nothing to them because I didn't commit any sins against them, and they're not slaves themselves, so I don't owe them anything. If the facts led me to a place where I'm like, you know what? Maybe the black community does deserve some compensation.
How do you feel about reparations?
I and you probably both understand that when it comes to something like supporting inner city schools, throwing money at those schools does not do the trick. I don't think that and I feel funny about giving families that were not themselves affected by a tragedy like slavery money now, especially because it's just money. Money doesn't help unless it's utilized in the proper ways. And I think of victims, people who were in the Holocaust. Immediately after escaping from their camps, or being freed, I should say, they were given reparations because they were directly affected. Their ancestors, their grandchildren, would be affected in some way, but they would in no way think that they were entitled to some kind of compensation.
There are definitely too many generations removed for it to make sense. I can agree with that.
Okay.
But
that's basically my opinion. There are too many generations removed for it to make sense. And then you run into problems of what criteria has to be met for you to be able to receive these. You have to be below $40,000 annually with your job. Because if you're a millionaire, what's he care about getting reparations, We are brought to you by Fairbury Furniture. Fairbury Furniture is the area's favorite furniture store. Their selection is huge, their staff is helpful and so friendly, and they have all of your favorite brands of mattresses, tables, chairs, recliners, couches, and basically all furniture items. So make your home comfy, stylish, and delightful when you shop at Fairbury's own beloved Fairbury Furniture. But yeah. So that's
essentially there should be something we could talk about. Because that definitely does make a lot of sense. We're too many generations removed. It's not. We shouldn't put the burden on current white people who are still alive today because they didn't have a damn thing to do with it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's not the black people's fault that we're too many generations removed, and it's not the white people's fault that we're too many generations removed. It's the U.S. government's fault. Because if the German government can acknowledge that they kind of screwed over generations of future Jewish kids and Jewish families by immediately giving them reparations, and then the Holocaust was only 20, 30 years, right?
You know what? My history's bad. I don't
Something
even
like
think
that.
it went that long.
It wasn't even long. It was like 20 years, if that.
I almost want to say less than 10 years, but you know what? I might be terribly
You know what I'm
wrong.
saying?
Yeah.
But then the German government can acknowledge that, like, even in this span of 20 years, we have fucked up future generations.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way we can fix this is the world runs our money, give these people a lot of money.
And they did it quick, though.
And they did quick.
Right. That's
Why the hell did the American government not realize that exact same thing?
Mm-hmm.
That's because they didn't want to realize it. That's because they didn't want black people to actually be in any better situation. They wanted them to be off of the plantation, but still enslaved economically. Because
it was really the same government that was issuing slavery and that was not mandating slavery, allowing slavery. And then, like, once slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, it's still the same government. They're not happy about the whole thing. And they're like, of course they're not going to give reparations. But in Germany, it was Hitler. Hitler died. A vastly different government followed. So they're like, we see that was totally different. So they had a clear perspective in Germany.
Something that we definitely need to talk about is Americans.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that is owed to black people. I don't believe that should be a debate. There's any people who were enslaved for 400 years and are still feeling the ripple effects of it today. And if you even look at the continent of Africa, where black people are imported from, where we come from, that's also in distress because of the same people. So there's no debate or question, if you ask me, about whether reparations is deserved, because it is. The question is, how do we give out reparations? Now, I think white people just giving money, that's not necessarily fair because it wasn't their problem. They didn't have anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. But the government runs colleges, don't they?
Yeah,
Why
public colleges.
A nice way to pay back reparations is every descendant of slave gets college 75% free.
Okay. I mean, I see what you're saying, but again, you said we're too many generations removed from slavery for it to make sense. You said that yourself.
But how does that? Because we're too many generations removed, as in the white generation, the generation of white family and white society. They had absolutely nothing to do with slavery. So they are too many generations removed to compensate anybody because it's not their fault. It wasn't their doing. They did no wrong.
So you're saying the white people alive today in no way are obligated or should be required to write a check.
Not if they don't want to.
Okay.
Not if they don't want to.
But you are saying that the black people that are descendants of slaves today in America, they still do feel the ripple effects.
They definitely do.
And you know what? Like I said, I'm not super pro reparations as it stands at this moment, but I will admit that after slavery, the local governments, federal government was very reluctant to give too much freedom to the black community. Up until like the 60s and 70s, 1960s, 1970s, there was such a thing. It was redlining communities. 90% of black people lived in these communities, in these areas, in the inner cities. What banks would do is they would draw a red line on the district map around these communities where 90% of black people were, and they would say that anyone that was coming from this area to get a loan to buy a house outside of that area would be declined on the basis or on the understanding that these were sketchy low-income areas and they wouldn't be able to pay the loan back on time, I guess.
So in different words, they really just meant anyone who was black.
It was a racist policy, for sure. Absolutely. And it was disguised as a responsible financial move on the bank's part.
And that's the conservative racism right there. That's concrete. Like, we're going to punch you in the face and it's going to be clear as day.
Yes, basically.
You know what I mean?
And that affected families up until the 70s before it was outlawed in, the 70s. So that, I will admit, that did have a horribly negative impact that stemmed from slavery and just kind of lasted forever. Like, the black people in America, they really, until that ended, there were some legal things that worked against them, I guess. And that's one of them. And so I have to admit, if I'm assessing the facts, that even from a legal standpoint, I mean, that's systemic racism big time. black people have had it rough and a little worse than white people. I'll say until the 70s, as far as the law is concerned. So I still hesitate to say, so that made it so that they could never leave the inner city. They had to stay there. And they had to stay in these low income, really sketchy, high crime areas. Mm-hmm. And then you just breed more of the same type of thing. So that...
But think about that. You can't even get a loan, so you can't leave that situation.
Right.
Can't get a loan to come back and make that situation better.
Until just 50 years ago.
The war on drugs, where we know factually drugs were placed here by the CIA, where drugs were placed there factually by the CIA. Mm-hmm. We then know, okay, why were they placed here by the CIA? That was probably so they can continue as a cycle. They can continue the cycle of selling these drugs, killing each other over these drugs, and they don't have any option to do anything other than drugs because they can't even get a loan to come back and make the community better. They can't get a loan to leave the community.
Right. They keep them there. They kept them there, and it was terrible. It's unfortunate for those black people that were stuck.
We're talking just capital, getting capital. We're talking capital. Now let's just talk about the workforce alone. There've been many studies that shows on a resume alone, if you just put a black name next to a white name on a resume, HR is more likely to pick that white name out of the envelope. Now, that's probably not racism. That's probably just a lack of diversity. Because if the HR person is white, obviously he's going to pick the name that he's more familiar with. Mm-hmm. You know, that's not necessarily because they hate black people.
Yeah.
That's just, if I'm a white guy, I grew up in a white community, my name is Dan Smith, and I know... And I'm just culturalized more with white names, and I'm now an HR officer in some company, and I see these two resumes that are exactly the same. My name's Dan Smith. I see Blake Jefferson, and then I see Deshante Robertson. Like, of course, I'm not just
you pick what you're familiar with
naturally. You know what I mean? And that's probably what's creating that number. Mm-hmm. But yes, that's also a thing. Black people have a harder time getting jobs too. And they've always had before. It's probably because of how I just explained it. It's just too many white guys in HR, and they're just naturally picking other white guys. Mm-hmm. But back in the day, it was HR officers were probably trained to really take a 15th look at this black person and make sure that they're okay. Because if we're gonna take black people, they have to be perfect, not one problem. You know what I mean? And that made it hard for black people to get jobs.
Yeah.
So literally in a lot of cases, and we're talking about just skilled people, because there's so many people just naturally when they don't have any disadvantages, they have so many problems just finding a natural skill that they can go to, you know what I'm talking about? That they can go find a job for. But they couldn't get jobs. They couldn't get loans. So these people were just stuck in the hood. And the majority of all they can do is sell drugs to feed their families. Mm-hmm. And now because of this, they're now doing illegal things. Now, cops can now come into the community, collect handfuls of them, and then take them to jail for them to stay there for 20, 25 plus years. And let me not even start on the sentencing, because there's so much evidence and facts alone that shows that black people get sentenced harder than white people for the same crime. And again, that might just be lack of empathy. You don't know this black kid situation.
I was going to say that.
You don't know this black kid situation. You're a judge just looking down on him.
A white jury and a white judge will have less sympathy for them because they're not familiar with it. They have nothing in common.
And I've always been the black person that why do we get so upset about white people being racist? Like racism is it's a natural thing. Our focus as black people should be on building our community and making sure that, and the only time we should be focusing on white people, other than social things, obviously, it's good for America should be a melting pot and we should all talk to each other and all build with each other. But we should only be focusing on white people when it comes to making sure that they're not fucking with what we're trying to build. And that's why I can talk to conservatives, because essentially you guys just almost don't care whether you're racist or not. And that's what a conservative is. I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative black person. I won't say I'm a Republican, but I'm a conservative black person. I conserve to myself and what's important to me. And what's important to me is my family, my community, and building black people. And of course, I have many white friends and I love white people. I love people. But what is important to me is building my community. And what is important to white men, I am sure, is building their community. Mm-hmm. And their community happens to be white because they're white. And that doesn't make them racist. They just want to build their community. Now, what the true racist is somebody like the Ku Klux Klan, like teaches hate.
Yeah, think someone is lesser than.
Yes, you think somebody is lesser than. They teach hate. Mm-hmm. I don't care about this white guy who just like, he's just trying to build his community and he doesn't really care about what's going on over here in the inner city. Why does he have to care? That's not where he's from. Like, you know what I mean? Right. And that's always been, I've always been that black
Interesting.
guy. But that's scary because what does that do? That takes the emotion out of all of out of all of the racism that we face in America. That takes the emotion out of it. Mm-hmm. So MSNBC and CNN cannot manipulate me because they can get up there with their George Floyd reports constantly, barbarian me with their George Floyd reports. But I see George Floyd as one black guy who died by one racist cop who hated, or if Derek Chauvin hated racist black people, whether he did or not, I see Derek Chauvin as one man. I'm looking at something bigger than just police brutality. You know what I mean? And those are essentially the people that liberals do not like. Those are the people that liberals don't want white people and the rest of America to hear from. Because they want to put things like critical race theory into schools because that dumbs black kids down. That dumbs black kids down, and that makes you, when you're black and you just see life in the way that they're trying to teach you, you just automatically see yourself at the bottom. Mm-hmm. You go into when it's time to negotiate salary, you go into HR, and you feel like, oh my God, I'm just a black guy. I'm lucky to even have this job. You're not going to go in there with the same confidence as this white kid, because this white kid has been taught in school for the last 18 fucking years. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
The last 18 years of his life that, oh yeah, white males, it's so easy for them, etc. They're literally just telling you what you are in society in the skies of education.
Do you think race, it could just be arbitrary? What do you think of that? I know Morgan Freeman's all about that. He says, how do you combat racism? You stop talking about it. We're all equals innately as human beings. I feel kind of funny.
You're right.
I feel kind of funny about when you say, I think you kind of want the black community to worry about the black community, help one another. But it's like, what separates you from me or you from a white person?
So
these communities, I feel like, I don't know. Because there's always going to be communities, and you should worry about what's going on in your own home before you start concerning yourselves with other parts of the world and stuff.
First, yeah. The whole idea of white people take care of white people, black people take care of black people, that might come off a little scary.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because it kind of sounds like segregation, right?
Yeah,
it's
it almost
wait,
sounds
are we going back 50 years now?
Yeah.
No. So it kind of sounds like segregation. I get that. But separation and segregation are two different things. Segregation was separation by law, forcefully. Separation is a choice, essentially. Now, if you have the choice, you don't have problems with other people. And we live in a capitalistic society. So the way they rigged the game, because of slavery and because of Jim Crow, and we're only, 50 years removed from that, whether we like it or not, they have rigged the game for people who have lighter skin to have more privilege than people who have darker skin. That's because all of the institutions we know, whether it's McDonald's, whether it's Sony, Walmart, you name it, it's owned by somebody with light skin. Light skin, whether it's a white man, white person, or an Asian person. It's somebody with light skin.
Okay.
Now, what we were just talking about naturally, naturally that judge might not have empathy for this black kid, right? Naturally, this white HR officer is going to see this white name next to this black name and just choose what he's familiar with. So naturally, if this white guy at the top owns this company, he's naturally going to surround himself by white people in the management level who are naturally going to hire white HR officers who are naturally going to hire white employees until somebody says, wait a second, we have like no people of color here. And then they have to like slow down. Okay, let's regroup. Let's compensate. Let's do stuff like, what is it called when they forcefully bring people in of color? I forgot the term.
When they forcefully bring people in, I don't know. There's like this diversity. They have like diversity mandates and stuff.
Yes, diversity mandates, but there's a term for it. It's a simple term. I don't know why I'm forgetting it, but a simple term, and that's when these companies then have to compensate and work overtime to get people of color back into the companies, just so they can look good for society.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. They want to look good for society.
And that's not because these people are racist. Well, some might be racist. Don't get me wrong. Some might be racist. But, however, that's because the people who own and run it are white. So what are they naturally going to do? They're naturally going to employ themselves. Unless you have to be 115% aware of that every single day when you walk into the office. That we need to get to help the world. We need to empower all different types of people. Right. People don't wake up thinking like that. They just want to make the dollar, right? They just want to build their company, so they're going to hire people they know and trust. If you're white, you're going to know most white people, and you're going to trust the people you know. So you hire the people you know. Yeah. And then that's why it's no fault of our own that white privilege exists. But because of the system we created 400 years ago, that's why white privilege exists. Do you understand how I explained it up to this point?
Yes, yeah. I think so.
So like,
and I hesitate to employ the phrase white privilege just because I think it can get overused, and
definitely overused.
People, I really don't like it. I've had people say I'm a victim of, or not a victim. I have white privilege, even though maybe in the winter I guess I'm fairly complected, but in the summer I'm dark, and I don't know if I am white. I do have white privilege and stuff, and you know,
you have half white privilege.
I guess I am lighter complected, like you said.
Are both sides Hispanic?
No, it's like nearly half Mexican, nearly half Irish, European.
So one side is half white?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Or one side's fully white, and the other side's fully
Mexican,
brown. It's like Mexican, Greek, Italian stuff, and all that. I took a 23andMe test. That's why I know.
So you're half. So yeah, like you would have half white privilege if you want to say white privilege is a thing. But
yes.
Again, I am conservative, so I do have a hard time accepting this idea of white privilege myself. But it is real. However, it's not real in a sense of that's the end all be all. You know what I mean? If, for example, the things I'm doing now, like the position I've gotten myself to in terms of my connections, my interviews, me being black didn't stop me in any way. I feel like it helped me in many ways because again, there's some white people who feel guilty and they're like, oh damn, I actually don't know any black people. Here's this ambitious black kid who like is very knowledgeable in his craft. Like I want to help him. I want to help him out. I like this young charismatic kid. I'm going to help him out. And I felt like being black helped me with when it comes to white people giving me opportunities. I truly felt that way. But not being white didn't stop me in that situation. You know what I mean? So
that sounds like an empowering thing to say to the black community.
And it's very
that you just said that.
And it's very empowering because.
But white liberals will not like that you said that for some reason.
That. They hate when I say that stuff. But that's because, again, that might be touching that little racist bone in them that they don't want to talk about. This black guy doesn't think he's not shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's touching that little racist bone that's inside of them. But yeah, I believe that because I've done a lot of my things within my craft independently, I didn't really go through the school system. I was the one on my own time sending out emails to all these different teams, building my own website, learning how to write stories and cover basketball games for the web, posting them myself. And I was learning that craft individually. I didn't experience any type of problem because I was a black kid. So when you want to go through corporate America, white privilege exists. White privilege exists. That's almost like saying, for somebody to say white privilege doesn't exist in corporate America, that's almost like saying male privilege doesn't exist in corporate America. But when it comes to, like, can we agree that male privilege exists?
Well, let me think here for a second.
Male privilege so exists.
Let me think.
So many different
Male
aspects of life.
privilege. Well, okay. Let's talk about, like, you say the STEM. Look at the STEM fields, right? They're dominated by men. Those are some of the most high-paying jobs in technology, in tech, engineering, science and technology, engineering, math. They're dominated by men, for sure. Why is that? Well, it's because women aren't interested in it. 90% of majors that are in those fields are occupied by men. And that's why men occupy those jobs. And I don't know. I don't know enough about it to say that I do, in fact, think that there's a male privilege in corporate America. I think they dominate it. I think most men...
No, just based off of like that whole idea of what I was saying before, like the natural... When a white man sees a black name and a white name in front of him on two different resumes, that white dude's naturally going to pick the white name. Through no fault of his own, it's natural. He's going to pick what he's familiar with and what he's more comfortable with. Yeah. So if majority of men are in the workforce because 50, 60 years ago, culturally, it wasn't normal, it wasn't standard for women to work. 50, 60 years later, they're going to be behind. So that means there are more men in the workforce. There are more men behind the HR desk, hiring men to be in powerful positions. And it's also just our mentality of how we view men and women. I'm not going to lie to you. I believe men are stronger physically and mentally myself. Yeah. And so,
did you say stronger how? Stronger?
Mentally and physically.
Okay. Physically, definitely. Mentally, I'm a man of fact, dude. People hate it. But I mean, yeah, there's plenty of studies that show that women will break mentally when the going gets rough, like in wartime situations. If they will. So I guess on average, not in every situation, of course, but on average, I suppose they are. Men are mentally stronger. They can at least hold it together when stuff goes crazy, like when an attacker attacks and stuff like that. Anyways.
And on average, that's what I'm saying. On average, man, that's what I believe in most men will believe. On average, yes. But again, cancel culture.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not worried. I don't think I'll get canceled. And if I do, I won't. Who cares? That's why I do this podcast. That's why I'm self-employed. That's why we can say whatever we want.
That's true.
So that's a whole nother podcast episode right there, the whole men and women thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But we're getting to the end of this conversation, Zay, and I just want to ask, and it's a loaded question, what do you think is going to be a key thing that the black community needs to begin or continue doing or do more of in order so that they can really prosper in the near future?
Building businesses and patroning those businesses we build. Now that goes back to why I said separation, not segregation, because if you look, and it also goes back to how we have less property and less net worth now than we did 60, 70 years ago. Because 60, 70 years ago, we weren't allowed to shop at white mega stores. We had to build our own stores and shop at them. So what that did was that built property, that built net worth for black people. So we need to do that again, but this time not through force because we don't have an option. This time through knowledge and education, understanding that there's unity in numbers. This is why white people are so dominant and this is why white people are so powerful, because they did it for 400 years at an extreme level. Not only did they buy, build, and sell together, they also enslaved black people to make sure that black people couldn't do that to even compete. So the gap is crazy right now. So what black people need to do is understand that building together, buying together, and selling together is what empowers people. And that's not a racist thing. That's just an economic thing. And racism is economics. If you look at the root word of racism, you get ism, ISM. Ism is the practice of something, the practice of. And then if you look at the beginning of racism, you see race. Race means to compete. So racism is you are in the practice of competition. There's racism in capitalism. Ism meaning the practice of something, right? Capital meaning money or assets. So we are in the practice of money and assets in capitalism. Within a country that has racism in the practice of a race. So we are racing, essentially. We're in a race for capital in this country, essentially, between white, black, not in an evil hatred way. That's the way they've built it. And we need to understand together if we want to eliminate racism. This is where the white liberals who love black people so much can help out. Is nothing matters. You can march on the streets all you want. You can paint BLM signs in yellow on the streets of New York all you want. But what only matters is the money you donate to black businesses. Because if white people really truly want America to be equal, black businesses and white businesses need to be here. And then once they're here, they can start helping each other. And that's the vision I have for America. That's the vision I have for America. But because white businesses manipulated the game for so long, for 400 plus years, black businesses and white businesses can't work together as of now, unfortunately. So that's why there's power in black unity, and that's what they're distracting us from. So bottom line, to answer that question is black people need to help each other build businesses and help each other's businesses grow, just like white people did.
Fair enough.
Yeah, man.
You have been able to articulate your points and your thoughts and beliefs incredibly well, more well than I think maybe I've ever heard them, attempted to be articulated. So
appreciate that, boss.
Absolutely. It's been an honor to sit and have this civil conversation about hot button issues with you. And, Zay, thanks for coming on, man. It's been great.
I do want to say something, though.
Yes.
It does mean a lot that you invited me on this show to talk about issues that a lot of other white people wouldn't be comfortable with, especially when we're talking about, they won't even be comfortable talking about this in private, let alone in front of a camera. And, this should change this whole idea that conservative white people are racist, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're all just misunderstood.
I think so.
Just misunderstood, manipulated by the same oppressive government. And those are the people who we need to be paying attention to. And that's why I'm a conservative, because I'm about little government. They're evil. I don't want them fucking with us. You know what I mean? So thank you for having me on the show. Seriously.
It was an immense pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on.
It,
Absolutely. Right on, dude. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to that episode of The Paul Garcia Show. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it on Facebook or with your friends. And if you haven't already, like this page on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave this show a 5-star rating and an honest review. If you'd like to support The Paul Garcia Show, you can do so by donating any dollar amount on Venmo to The Paul Garcia Show. Additionally, if you'd like to become a monthly donor and gain access to exclusive bonus footage, you can do so on patreon.com/Paul Garcia. Until next Sunday, thanks for listening and watching. I'm Paul Garcia. God bless and have a great week.